point to make.
Ayman, I don't know if you can see what we're actually broadcasting on Al Jazeera English right now. We just put up a bit of a comparison. On the left-hand side is your live camera from our bureau. The right-hand side, state television, Egyptian television. The contrast could not be more stark. We've also seen a newsreader appearing announcing the curfew, apparently. But apparently Egyptian TV isn't seeing what you're seeing.
Between Egyptian television and our own cameras. The distance between our two cameras is probably no more than several hundred meters, but focused on two very different realities in Cairo tonight. What you are seeing on Egyptian television there, that bright building, Egypt's Opera House, an iconic building, the bridges that they're trying to show you, traffic moving smoothly, people moving smoothly, no presence of police on the streets. Now, a short while ago, Egyptian state media was reporting that indeed security forces managed to bring the situation under control. Over the past few days, they have come under intense scrutiny for the way they have handled this, the way they've reported this. Some of Egypt's most prominent news anchors who have, for years become iconic figures in the Egyptian media landscape have actually, in the words of the official statement, been put on vacation. There is a prominent anchor named Mahmoud Saad. He's known for having a talk show program. He has gone on an unidentified leave of absence because it was widely seen that he supported the protest. So it gives you a sense of the rift within Egypt's Ministry of Information and Egypt's radio and television, which is a very important branch of the government. It constantly projects the image of the government, and its pictures really speak for themselves. All of this is very visible to Egyptian television. They are opting to show the world and to show their own citizens a very different Cairo than what is emerging on the streets from where our cameras are capturing.
Yeah, and apparently I've just been told, Ayman, that news anchor that we saw on the right-hand side of the screen on Egyptian television was announcing a curfew for the entire country now. It started out, of course, the presidential order was for Cairo. For Alex, if you're tuning in and wondering what you're looking at right now, the left-hand side of the screen, these are both live pictures, I've got to tell you. On the left-hand side of the screen is the Al Jazeera English camera from our bureau in Cairo, looking at a police personnel carrier that has been torched by protesters just outside our office building in Cairo. The right-hand side of your screen is Egyptian state television. They have announced there is a curfew in place for the entire country, but as Ayman Mohyeddin was pointing out, these two cameras bringing you these two shots are not much more than a couple of hundred meters apart. They tell an entirely different story about what is going on in Cairo this evening. Absolutely extraordinary pictures that we've been bringing you all day from Cairo and from around the country. We saw our first pictures from Alexandria not long ago, and that's where we're going to go now. Raouya Ragay on the line from Alexandria, where, Raouya, last time I spoke to you, you told me things felt like they were escalating. What's it like?
Kamal, as I had mentioned, we had earlier confirmed the first sighting of the military here in Alexandria. There was a lone armored personnel carrier with just a few soldiers that we had seen drive by about 35 minutes ago. But now, just in the past 5 minutes, we've seen at least 5 tanks roll through the city, completely flowing smoothly, with not being stopped by protesters. In fact, though, one of these tanks was surrounded by protesters who were clapping and cheering and waving the Egyptian flags. The soldiers came out of the tanks. I can see them clearly in front of me, coming out of the tank, shaking hands with the dozens of people, and the number is swelling by the second, really, surrounding them, and they're shaking the hands of each and every person surrounding that specific tank. There are still cars driving around, so clearly there are some vehicles and pedestrians who are defying the curfew. But the army tanks and the soldiers aren't even stopping them, because they are clearly being welcomed here on the streets of Alexandria, at least as far as I'm concerned, as far as the part that we can see of town is concerned.
And they are completely in control, Raouya, the army?
Come again?
They are completely in control of Alexandria now?
I can't really judge, because communications are so difficult. We're unable to communicate with other people in other parts of the city. if they are in complete control, you would have assumed that they would have at least tried to stop traffic. But we're still seeing traffic. It's much lighter than earlier in the evening, but we're still seeing traffic, and we're still seeing people walking on the streets. So clearly, at least, they're not imposing that curfew in a heavy-handed manner. So it's not clear to us if they're trying to, or if they're just simply being, because they're being welcomed by people, there's very little that they can do at this moment.
Okay, thanks for that, Raouya Raghi in Alexandria. These pictures are live from Cairo. Similar to what Raouya is telling us, you're talking about this military presence there, and you see there on that shot, the military vehicles coming from underneath that bridge in very large numbers. Ayman, I asked Raouya if the military was in control down over in Alexandria. Is there any sense that the military could take some semblance of control in Cairo?
Well, Kamal, you just heard that loud explosion, but more interesting in terms of the developments, the images that you just saw there on your streets a short while ago, a loud round of applause from the protesters. We looked out the window, and indeed they were Egyptian armored personnel carriers that looped around from underneath the bridge and then crossed right underneath it. They're heading in the direction of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, which is right next to the radio and television building, and the Ministry of Information. We saw about 5 or 6 personnel carriers belonging to the Egyptian military. So you can definitively now say the Egyptian armed forces are on the streets of Cairo. They are engaging in at least implementing the curfew, but the question is, to what extent are they going to use force? The direction that they were moving in from underneath the bridge and on the Corniche suggests that they were moving in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the Ministry of Information, and the radio and television building. Now, why that's so important is because earlier, that is where we were reporting the most intense clashes happening. We saw as the protesters moved around from right in front of our office building, just down several hundred meters away to that radio and television building. We were told there was attempts by thousands of protesters to storm the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and also nearby the Ministry of Information and the radio and television building. Undoubtedly, those are 3 of the most important buildings here in the heart of Cairo, and you can see from those pictures that you're playing once again the Egyptian military, and what it looks like, from what I was able to see, Egyptian flags being waved by the troops that were on that. It's still a bit of a confusing scene, somewhat chaotic. We were also getting, and very important to emphasize this, unconfirmed reports that there were people on the street. We did not see that ourselves, but it does highlight the sense of chaos that has ensued around so many of these critical government buildings.
Is that the NDP compound we're seeing, the compound of the ruling party, Ayman, in that shot?
It is. We have panned back. That fire now has been blazing for several hours. Again, it's the NDP headquarters, which next to it also is a compound. It includes other government buildings such as the National Council for Women's Rights and an auditorium where several conferences are oftentimes held. Just behind that, a much more important building for Egypt's tourism industry, which is the National Antiquities Museum, one of the most iconic and historic buildings right in the heart of Meydan Tahrir, the Liberation Square. That museum is going to be on a very heightened state of alert. What is really alarming about all of this, Kamal, is that we have not seen in the hours that we have been broadcasting these images live a single fire truck attempt to try to bring the situation under control, either at the NDP or in any of these fires that have been burning near our office. It is as if the entire government apparatus, which includes the security forces as well as paramedics, as well as the fire services that were so heavily present throughout the course of the day, just seemed to have melted away into the city as the night fell. And as protesters, and as the images show, the curfew has not been imposed. The curfew in Cairo and perhaps across the country has been defied by the protesters who continue to roam the streets of Cairo this evening.
All right, Ayman, thanks for now. That's Ayman Mohideen in Cairo. We had Raouya Raghi from Alexandria before. Also, Jamal Al-Shayal on the line from Suez. The military moved in. How they've been greeted there, Jamal?
Kamal, it is very difficult to understand exactly how they are being greeted, because initially there were thousands who had gathered around the vehicle. There were several armored personnel carriers and one tank. And within minutes, just literally before you came to me, there was live fire coming from the police station in Suez towards the military and towards the people that were gathered there. We are unable to understand who exactly is in control of the police station where the fire was coming from. As soon as this fire continued, there was a rally that went on for about 30 seconds of fire. The military vehicles turned their engines on and drove towards this police station. The people are still gathered. There are still thousands on the streets here. Also interesting to note is there is a significant personality here known as Ibrahim Farak, who people here tell me is very close to the regime. His shops have been under attack for more than an hour now. Where I'm standing, he owns a car showroom and several other commodities retailers. And the people here say that his children, according to them, are holed up in the police station. With the police, and they were the ones behind the firing. We cannot personally verify that, but what I can tell you is there has been sound of something very similar to live fire coming from the police station towards the direction of the armed vehicle towards the police station, and the situation here continues tense as usual. Right now, as I'm speaking, there are two very large fire engines. They are being driven towards the people, much slower than they were in the morning. These are actually military fire engines, and they are doing exactly the same, it seems, as what the military vehicles. They're doing a U-turn and traveling now. The lights, the lampposts in the main streets, half of them have been cut off, so half of the street is now in total blackness, and we await to see exactly what will continue. Kamal.
Jamal O'Shea with a live update from Suez there. We've been around all our correspondents. I'll go back to our guests in London in a moment for a bit of analysis. However, on the line just now, Timothy Caldas, who is an Egyptian-American photographer out in Cairo today. Where are you right now, Timothy? What are you seeing?
Right now I'm back in Zamalek. We've been on the streets all day. We started at Al-Azhar during the prayer, and then we worked our way back downtown and along the Nile until we got back to Zamalek. Just a little while ago, there was a fire that we could see towards, in the direction of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs along the Nile on the Corniche. And there's another fire across the Nile in front of the Conrad Hotel at what was a restaurant and bar called Sangria. We also saw personal armored carriers from the Army as they entered Cairo this afternoon, sometime around 4:35.
Timothy, one of our guests earlier said today that the fear has been removed from the people of Egypt. They are fearless. Is that how you feel now out there? Is that how it feels?
The numbers clearly show that that's the case. The streets have been full of people. I met a surgeon who works at a hospital in Shubra telling me that he was that he went to pick up one of his son's friends from the police station because he had been picked up in one of the earlier protests a couple of days ago, and he found that all the people who had been arrested were just young boys, the oldest of them 19 or 20 years old, and he felt embarrassed, and so he took his son to the protest this morning saying that we all have to be out there, and today we found women, men, old, young, children, all out in the streets protesting against the Mubarak regime.
It's a different country now, isn't it, Timothy? Completely from the one it was even just a few hours ago.
Oh, things have changed pretty dramatically. I mean, just this morning when I was in taxis before the protest got underway, the drivers were excited. They were telling me how they were going to park their cars and go out and protest as soon as prayers were over. There's a clear energy there. I found a lot of people who normally completely apolitical committed to going out just today and saying that it's come time.
Timothy, great talking to you. Timothy Caldas there giving us a real picture of what's going on at street level in Cairo. Thanks for that. We have two guests in London. I've got to thank both of them for staying with us because obviously we've had a lot of breaking news going on, a lot of events happening, but they've both stayed there. I'm going to go to Nabila Ramdani first for your thoughts on, well, the last hour of what you've seen, the fact that a curfew was put in place. It has done absolutely nothing.
Well, I think it's fascinating to note that the ruthlessness of the crackdown on demonstrators is paralleled by an equally ruthlessness on a crackdown on the media coverage, as you raised earlier. We've seen everything used by the security forces against demonstrators, from tear gas to water cannons to rubber bullets, baton charges, and there are even strong rumours that live ammunition is being used against demonstrators. And similar draconian and, dare I say, sinister tactics are now being used to prevent media coverage to show the reality of what's going on the ground, and to try to underplay and indeed minimise the scale and the intensity of what's going on in Egypt at the moment across the nation. And we have seen a crackdown on not only Egyptian journalists. Obviously we're dealing with a country where the media are hugely restricted and indeed state controlled for the most part, but also crackdown on foreign journalists. I think a British journalist was injured earlier on today. Several of them were arrested. French journalists were arrested as well. So we're definitely witnessing a desperate attempt by the regime to suppress any form of coverage of the situation